Good evening, and welcome back to Whispers at Night. Tonight, we're steering off the beaten path and into the shadowy world of America's highways. What you're about to hear are 10 unsettling true accounts from truckers who've faced horrors most of us will never encounter. These aren't whispers of urban legends or stories told to spook rookies on their first run. Every experience comes directly from drivers, men and women who spend their lives behind the wheel of 18-wheelers, crossing the loneliest stretches of asphalt. Their testimonies have been echoed through CB radios, confirmed in trucking circles, and recounted in interviews with those who lived through the terror. If you're just joining us, make sure you subscribe to Whispers at Night, your nightly stop for real horror stories that don't fade once the video ends. Tap the bell icon so you'll never miss when we shine a light on the darker side of the open road. So climb into the passenger seat and listen closely. Out there, in the dead of night, every highway hides secrets, and sometimes, the truckers are the only ones who come face to face with them. It was the tail end of July 2011, the kind of sticky Midwest summer night where the heat doesn't break even after the sun's been down for hours. I was running a load of frozen produce out of Grand Rapids, Michigan, bound for a distribution center just outside Nashville. By then, I'd been trucking for about 6 years. 38 years old, recently divorced, and with nothing but the job to keep me grounded. The road had become the only thing that really made sense anymore. That night, I pulled off I-65 and rolled into one of those sprawling travel plazas somewhere between Louisville and Bowling Green. The kind of place built to swallow 200 semis without breaking a sweat. Fuel islands on one end, a diner with neon lights buzzing over the doorway, and a low beige building off to the side where you could grab a shower if you had $12 to spare. I checked the clock as I eased my Kenworth into a slot between two reefers. The digital readout glowed 11:02 p.m. The lot was 3/4 full, the air thick with diesel haze and the steady hiss of brakes bleeding air. I grabbed my shower kit and a clean change of clothes from the sleeper, locked up and started walking. The plaza was alive in its usual way, engines idling, someone laughing into a CB nearby, the occasional thump of rubber boots on pavement. Nothing out of the ordinary. The shower building wasn't far, maybe 150 feet across the lot. Its blocky frame glowed under harsh fluorescent tubes, throwing pale light onto cracked concrete. Inside, the kid at the counter couldn't have been older than 19. Skinny acne scars along his jaw, barely looked awake as he slid me a receipt with a stall number scrawled on it. Number 11. That shower was worth every penny. I let the hot water run until my skin prickled red and the steam fogged the little mirror above the sink. 20 minutes of heat was enough to peel off the weight of Indiana's humid July air. When I finally stepped back into the night, my hair damp, shirt clinging cool to my back, the plaza felt different. Most of the overhead lamps still burned, but the way the shadows stretched between rows of trucks seemed sharper, heavier. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked from inside a cab, and I caught the faint strains of an old Hank Williams tune bleeding from someone's radio. I cut past the fuel islands heading back to my truck when I noticed a rig parked on the far side of the lot. A white Freightliner, idling with its headlights on full blast. At first I figured the driver had just forgotten to kill the beams, but then they flicked off. A few seconds later, back on, then off, then on again. Not random, not careless, deliberate. My stomach knotted as I realized the beams weren't just flashing, they were following me. Every few steps I took, that truck seemed to adjust, angling slightly, repositioning so the glare washed over me again. The pattern wasn't rhythmic like Morse code. It was clumsy but intentional, like whoever sat behind that wheel wanted me to know they were watching. I tried to shrug it off, quickening my pace, the damp ends of my hair dripping down my collar. About halfway to my Kenworth, I heard the low groan of an engine revving and then cut off. The lights blinked out. A second later came the metallic slam of a cab door. That sharp, hollow thud carried clear across the lot. I risked a glance over my shoulder. A figure was climbing down from the Freightliner. Tall, well over 6 feet, built broad in the shoulders, moving with an ease that set my nerves on fire. No sluggish shuffle, no weary gait like you'd expect from a road-tired trucker. His stride was steady, purposeful, cutting across the asphalt at an angle that would bring him directly into my path. He wore dark coveralls and a biasit, all cap pulled so low I couldn't see his face. Worse, his hand reached back into the cab and came out holding something long and metallic. The dim light caught the edge and I recognized the shape immediately. A tire iron. My rig was still 2 rows away. Too far. I ducked between 2 parked reefers, crouching low as their compressors thumped and rattled, covering the sound of my footsteps. Through the gap under the trailer's belly, I caught sight of his boots. Worn work boots. Duct tape wrapped around one toe. The soles scuffed smooth. He stopped exactly where I'd been walking seconds earlier. He stood still, listening. 10 seconds dragged like a lifetime before those boots shifted again. He started walking slower now, scanning, as if he knew I hadn't gone far. The hum of the reefers covered my breathing, but every nerve screamed at me to move. I doubled back, slipping to the next row of semis, trying to stay swallowed in shadow. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought it might echo off the metal walls around me. From the corner of my eye, I could see my Kenworth, a dark blue with chrome accents that suddenly felt far too recognizable in a sea of white and red trailers. The problem was the 30 feet of open pavement between me and safety. Then I heard it, a sound that froze me to the spot. Whistling. Not a tune, not a melody, just a low, airy whistle. Soft, steady, the kind you'd use to call a dog. The sound bounced between trailers, warping, making it impossible to tell how close he was. I pressed my back against a trailer door, nails digging into the ridged metal, willing myself to stay still. Footsteps, slow, measured, the scrape of metal against steel as that tire iron tapped against bumpers and hitches. Then, through the shadows, I caught him. He was moving row by row, peering between rigs, swinging the iron lazily as though he had all the time in the world. A heavy-set man in a Bronco's hood. I appeared about 50 feet away, walking toward the restrooms with a bag of fast food in one hand. I nearly called out, desperate to grab his attention, but just as I opened my mouth, the whistling stopped. Dead silence. My blood turned to ice. I peeked through the landing gear of the trailer I crouched behind. My stalker stood perfectly still between 2 cabs, tire iron dangling at his side. He wasn't looking at me. He was watching the man in the Bronco's hoodie, just watching as he walked past. Only when the guy vanished into the restroom building did the whistling pick up again, louder now, closer. I didn't wait. My legs were cramping from crouching and he was 3 rigs away. I gripped my shower bag tight and sprinted. Boots slammed against asphalt behind me, fast, closing the gap. The clang of the iron striking something metal rang out sharp. I didn't look back. My keys were in my pocket, slick from sweat as I yanked them free. The first attempt fumbled. My hands shook so bad the key missed the lock. The second time, it slid home and I wrenched the door open, throwing myself inside. I slammed it shut, hit the locks, and spun around just as his shadow fell across the side of my cab. Through the passenger window, 10 feet away, I saw him clearly for the first time. Mid-50s, skin weathered like old leather, a scraggly beard peppered with gray, and eyes the color of steel, cold, unblinking, empty. He didn't rush me. He just stood there under the harsh glow of the pole light, lifted the tire iron and pointed it at me like a teacher marking a student. I jammed the key into the ignition, engine roaring awake, adrenaline flooding every nerve. He didn't flinch, didn't try to climb up, just tilted his head slightly, studying me. When I shifted into gear and rolled forward, he stepped aside with deliberate calm, giving a little mock bow, as though granting me patience. Sage. I had no choice but to drive right past him. In my mirror, I watched as he turned and walked back toward his Freightliner, tossing the iron up into the air and catching it with one hand, like it was a toy. I didn't stop driving until I hit a pilot station 2 hours down the interstate, parking in a brightly lit spot right next to the fuel island. Sleep didn't come easy that night. and when I stepped out the next morning to do a pre-trip inspection, I saw something that made my stomach lurch. Scratched into the rear doors of my trailer were letters and numbers, my license plate number, carved deep into the paint. I filed a report with state police and told the plaza manager everything I could remember. The officer who took my statement told me I wasn't the first. Other drivers, especially women, had reported similar encounters in the last few months. Same details: Freightliner headlights flashing, a man with a tire iron whistling. One woman from Indiana had found her brake lines nicked. Another discovered her cargo seal broken, her goods tampered with but not stolen. They never caught him. The Freightliner plates I thought I'd seen traced back to a company that had folded years before. The cameras at the plaza just happened to miss the spot where he'd parked. Every lead turned into smoke. I still run that stretch of I-65 now and then. The money's good, and I can't afford to be picky. But I don't stop at that plaza anymore. I don't shower at night. I don't linger in the dark corners of parking lots. Other drivers, especially women, have their own rules now too. We share stories quietly over coffee at diners or on the CB, warning each other about rigs or men who don't feel right. A few months back, a friend of mine, Carla, told me she saw a white Freightliner parked at a rest area outside Indianapolis. Its headlights were off, but when she got close enough, she saw scratches covering the driver's side door. Dozens of them. Numbers, letters, a collection. He's still out there. Maybe with a different truck now. Maybe he's changed his methods, but I'll never forget those pale eyes under the brim of that cap, the way he pointed that tire iron at me like a hunter marking prey, and I know exactly what he's looking for. The fog was eating up Highway 376 that October night in 2022, turning the Alabama backroads into something that felt less like a road and more like a dream you couldn't wake from. I'd been hauling furniture out of Mississippi toward Atlanta for nearly 15 years by then, long enough to know every pothole, every speed trap, and every crooked little diner sign between Montgomery and the Georgia line. My old Peterbilt's cab was cluttered with the usual talismans that keep you company when the road feels endless. Photos of my wife, Carol, and our two boys taped above the visor. An Elvis bobblehead that my youngest shoved into my hands at a truck stop Christmas. And my mother's worn rosary swinging gently from the rearview mirror, catching the glow of the dash lights like a pendulum trying to measure time. That Tuesday had been cursed from the jump. A blown tire outside of Tupelo kept me sitting on the side of the road for nearly 3 hours, which meant my carefully timed schedule was shot to hell. By the time I rolled onto that empty stretch of 376, the dashboard clock burned back at me with cold green numbers. 2:47 a.m., the kind of hour where you start talking out loud to yourself just to prove you still exist. The air had turned on me too, dropping from 70 degrees to a sharp 40 in less than an hour. Humid mist had congealed into a wall of white fog, the kind that makes your high beams useless and makes you wonder if you're driving into the afterlife. That's when I saw her. She flickered into view right at the edge of my headlights, maybe 50 feet ahead, just inside the tree line. Couldn't have been older than 17. She wore what might once have been a nightgown, now shredded into dangling strips that clung to her thin frame. One shoulder bare, her skin pale against the black woods behind her. Her hair was dark, tangled with leaves, clotted dirt hanging, in thick strands down her back. Both her arms waved above her head in a jerky, panicked rhythm, the kind that bypasses your brain and drives straight into your gut. Her mouth was wide open, screaming silently against the rumble of my diesel engine. I slammed the brakes, hard enough that my thermos of coffee ricocheted off the windshield and left a wet streak across the dash. 15 years of night runs teaches you caution with roadside encounters. My first reflex was to reach for the .38 revolver I keep stashed under my seat. But then my headlights caught the tears on her face, cutting clean tracks through the grime. I saw her bare feet, split open and bleeding, leaving dark, wet prints on the asphalt. She staggered toward the truck, arms flailing, lips moving in frantic shapes I couldn't understand. I cracked the passenger window halfway, keeping one hand near my phone. "You hurt? You need help?" I called out. No answer, just more desperate pointing back toward the woods. Her eyes rolled white in the beams, and then she dropped. Right there on the gravel shoulder, she collapsed to her knees and began clawing at the earth with her fingernails, like an animal trying to dig something up or bury it. The fog swirled unnaturally around her, curling and coiling like smoke under glass. I swear the temperature inside my cab sank another 10 degrees in seconds. I fumbled for my phone, thumb hovering over 911. That's when she noticed me reaching. Her head snapped up, hair whipping her face, and then she bolted, charging straight at my truck. She hit the passenger door so hard the glass rattled in the frame. Her palms slapped against the steel again and again. Up close, she looked even worse. Lips swollen and blue-purple, the kind of color you only see on drowning victims. Around her wrists were perfect circular indentations, too even to be rope burns, not quite cuts, more, like she'd been locked in some kind of metal restraint. Her mouth worked feverishly, repeating the same phrase, but soundless. It took a second before I could read it. Others. There are others. And then she spun on her heel and sprinted back into the tree line, vanished between two massive oaks that looked old enough to have seen wars. For half a minute I just sat there, idling, heart slamming like a piston. Then I dialed state police. The dispatcher, a woman with a syrupy Montgomery drawl, took my location and promised units would be en route. 20 minutes out. 20 minutes might as well be 20 years when you're parked alone on a fog-smothered highway wondering if a bleeding girl just begged you to follow her. I couldn't sit still. Against every shred of trucker sense, I pulled the rig onto the shoulder, grabbed my mag light and the crowbar from behind my seat and stepped into the fog. The forest floor was wrong, soft, spongy, almost damp like a sponge. The smell hit me next, wet copper mixed with the sharp sting of antifreeze. About 30 feet in, my light caught on something unnatural. A blue tarp stretched taut between three trees. Beneath it, a hole gaped in the earth, maybe 4 feet across, its edges braced with planks. Not a well, not a storm drain. This was a tunnel, a makeshift ladder of rebar and knotted rope snaked down into pure blackness. Every instinct screamed to wait for the cops. But her face, those lips shaping others, I couldn't leave it. I aimed the flashlight down the shaft. 8 feet below, the hole opened into a crude chamber carved from dirt and shored up with splintering plywood. I saw a mattress half buried in shadows, shelves made of cinder blocks, and dozens of mason jars filled with dark matter. And then the wall came into view. Eye bolts hammered into beams, chains hanging from each ending in shackles. The metal gleamed like it had been polished, recently used, no rust. That was when I heard it, branches snapping behind me. Heavy, deliberate footsteps crunching through the underbrush. I bolted, crashing through vines, thorns whipping my arms, crowbar clenched in my fist. The footsteps followed for a few seconds, then cut off suddenly, as if swallowed by the fog. I didn't stop until my boots hit asphalt and my rig's headlights loomed through the mist. 12 minutes later, red and blue lights pierced the fog. 2 cruisers, then more. Before dawn, the place swarmed with uniforms. State police, FBI, even forensics out of Mobile. They found the tunnel, found the chambers. Evidence screamed of captivity. Blood-stained mattresses, shackles, jars filled with human teeth sorted by type like someone's grotesque filing system. Dogs sniffed. Excavators dug. They uncovered rooms connected by narrow tunnels spiderwebbing under the forest floor. But no bodies. Whoever ran that place had vanished into the fog. The papers ran the story for a week. Local trucker uncovers possible human trafficking site. The FBI agent in charge, a pale-eyed man named Agent Holloway, shook my hand and told me I'd probably saved lives. They'd found fresh food down there, milk unspoiled, prescription bottles filled days before. Someone had been keeping people in those holes and cleared out fast. But the news didn't print what came after. 3 weeks later, I was fueling up at a Love's near Meridian when my phone buzzed. A text. No area code, just 10 zeros. Earl Mathers, Peterbilt 579. Alabama plates GRK 2287. You should have kept driving. My full name, my exact rig, my plates renewed just 2 months prior. I showed it to the station clerk. He shrugged, said truckers get weird spam all the time. That night, parked at a rest stop, another text. This one worse. The girl wasn't lost. She was bait. Stop talking to the badges. Attached was a photo. Me, walking into the FBI field office in Birmingham the week before. Shot close enough that you could see the coffee stain on my flannel. By week's end, 4 other drivers from my company had texts too. Each message laced with personal details, names, addresses, family info. One guy, Ron Dillard, got a video of his daughter leaving school. Another, Jeff Porter, received a shot of his wife's car parked at her job with the message, "Beautiful family, shame if they travel alone." We turned it all in. Holloway promised they were investigating. Told us to vary our routes, stay alert. Easy words from a man who didn't have to drive Alabama back roads at night with a phone buzzing in his pocket like a live grenade. The last message I got came one Wednesday morning while I sat at home, pretending normal life with Carol and the boys. Coordinates, just numbers, and 2 words. She's waiting. I plugged them into my GPS. They pointed to a logging road 2 miles from the Oaks where I'd first seen her. I lied to Carol that I needed hardware supplies. Instead, I drove out there with my .38 loaded and the FBI office queued on speed dial. The road was a scar in the woods, overgrown with kudzu. At its end sat a white van, windows blacked out, engine idling, empty. On the driver's seat, a manila envelope, my name scrawled across the front. Inside, dozens of photographs. The girl, not just from that night. Different clothes, different ages. Some smiling, healthy, others gaunt, haunted, eyes full of dread. Always in woods, always with that practiced look of distress. The last photo turned my blood to ice. She was in a diner booth, laughing mid-sip of a milkshake, alive, ordinary. On the back, in neat block letters, she performs 3 times a week. Good drivers stop. Curious drivers dig deeper. Stupid drivers become problems. Which are you? I left the envelope exactly where I'd found it, drove straight to the FBI field office, handed everything to Holloway. 2 days later, he called me, said the van was gone. Sayas. The photos were nothing but blank slips of paper. That was 8 months ago, and I haven't driven Highway 376 since. My name is Evelyn Torres, but out on the CB, most folks just call me Evie. I've been hauling freight across this country for 18 years, and in that time I've weathered things most people only read about. Blizzards in Montana that bury the road, dust storms in Arizona that turn the world orange, tornado warnings in Kansas that make your teeth ache. Still, nothing in all those miles prepared me for the night I learned what can happen when faith on the highway turns violent and the devotion of a crowd becomes something deadly. It was late November, and I was running a load of auto parts from Detroit to Phoenix. The forecast had mentioned scattered showers through Tennessee and Arkansas. Nothing I hadn't driven through 100 times. But just after midnight, as I crossed into Arkansas, the storm came down like someone had opened up the heavens. Rain slammed into the windshield so hard my wipers couldn't clear it fast enough. Lightning lit the hills in strobe flashes, every flash transforming black trees into skeletal sentinels. The wind squeezed the cab and made the truck rock like a toy. I had to drop my speed to 40 just to keep the rig tracking straight. That's when the CB finally woke up. Voices popped through, tense and curious. "Anybody else seen something at mile marker 247? One driver asked, voice thin over the static. "Yeah, I'm here. What the hell is going on up there?" Another answered. I grabbed the mic. "Breaker 19, this is Evie Thunder, coming up on 247. What are y'all looking at?" I tried to keep my voice steady and businesslike, but my gut tightened with the same kind of feeling that tells you trouble's ahead. There was a pause, then a voice I didn't recognize, older and shook up. "Evie, you need to be careful through the next stretch. There's cars everywhere. It's like a parking lot out there." "Accident?" I asked, already reaching for my phone to call if needed. "No, ma'am," the man said. "That's the thing. They're all parked, lined up along both sides of the highway. 100 vehicles, maybe more." My skin crawled. 100 cars parked in the middle of a downpour, out on a remote stretch of interstate. That didn't add up. I crested a rise and the sight hit me like a punch. Rows of vehicles, headlights on, forming a glowing corridor that stretched for what seemed like a mile. People, too many people, stood in that rain between cars, not running for shelter, not climbing back inside. They just stood, soaked through, staring. I put my handset to my mouth. "Breaker 19, this is Evie. Anyone else seeing this? There's people standing out in the storm like they're waiting for something." Static. Then a voice answered, shaky. "Evie, this is Mountain Joe. I came through here 20 minutes ago. They tried to wave me in, wanted me to stop and join them. When I kept going, some of them ran after the truck, ran up alongside my trailer, pounding on the side, screaming something over the wind. Had to push it to 60 to get away." I drew closer and the details sharpened. The people in the rain weren't milling like they'd been caught in a squall. They stood in tight formation, all facing the same place. Their clothes were light-colored, white maybe, clinging to their bodies from the downpour. In the lightning flashes, their faces looked like carved dolls, pale, slack, with eyes that reflected back my headlights like the eyes of animals in a field. And then I saw what held their gaze. Off the shoulder, maybe 50 yards away, a giant wooden cross rose into the storm. 30 feet tall, bigger. It was burning. Flames licking upward despite the rain, throwing an otherworldly orange glow across that sea of white. The fire didn't gutter. It burned with a hungry, steady light that seemed to feed on the wind itself. Around it, the people were gathered like some grim congregation. As I pulled into the corridor, more faces turned toward me. Some raised hands in a slow, motionless wave. A few stepped closer to the asphalt as if to meet my truck halfway. I keyed the mic again. "Any law enforcement on this channel? We've got a serious situation on I-40 at mile marker 247. Looks like a religious meeting that's gone sideways." A calm, clipped voice came back almost at once. "This is Arkansas State Police. Units en route. Do not stop. Do not engage. Proceed through cautiously and report when you're clear." That was easier said than done. As I entered the corridor, bodies began closing in from both sides. They moved deliberate and slow, almost ceremonial. More people rose up from behind the vehicles and fell into step, unified in some strange choreography. Candles bobbed in hands and somehow stayed lit in the deluge. Some carried signs, but the writing had washed away in the rain, leaving only ragged fabric. A chant rose up that cut through the thunder, monotone, rhythmic, and oddly hypnotic. Even over my engine, it wormed into my head like a stubborn thought. Halfway through the gauntlet, a human waltz stepped onto the asphalt, hands locked shoulder to shoulder across both lanes. They swayed as they chanted. I had to crawl through, horn blasting, trying to push the line to let me pass. They didn't move. They bared their silent teeth as if daring me to stop. The whole scene felt like being inside a nightmare that had taken a physical form. The chanting grew louder and more insistent. A few of them reached up to my cab, fingers scraping along the door handles. Then one figure broke from the center of the crowd and walked straight toward my truck. He was different. Taller, long gray hair plastered to his head by the rain, clothes dark and untouched by the downpour. He didn't wear the white like the others. He was dry. He walked with a slow confidence, the It made the hairs on my arms stand on end. When he raised his hand, the chanting stopped as if a conductor had cut the music mid-note. Silence slammed down, heavier than the wind. He came to my driver's window and placed his palm flat against the glass. Not slapped, not urgent, just a steady touch. He looked in, and I felt as though something cold had reached into my chest. "Sister Evelyn," he said, clear as though he'd been sitting beside me for hours. My blood went cold because I had not told anybody my name. Not here, not around strangers. That voice knew me. "You've been chosen to witness the final gathering," he continued, and his eyes were like winter lightning. "The storm is our sign. The faithful must be prepared. The cleansing is near." He spoke like scripture and threat folded into one. My stomach flipped. I didn't hesitate. I put the rig into gear, pushed the pedal, and barreled forward. The crowd parted, not out of fear of me, but like actors stepping off stage for the next part of a play. I powered through at speed, and in my mirrors I watched them reassemble behind me, faces turned upward toward that burning cross. I didn't breathe until I'd passed mile marker 250, and the last of the headlights fell away in my mirror. My hands shook so hard I had to pull the truck into the nearest lot just to steady myself. I called 911 from a payphone, voice flat and shaking as I told the dispatcher what I'd seen. The cross, the rows of cars, the chanting people wearing white in the storm. They told me units were responding, that other drivers had called too. But when I asked for an update an hour later, the response was the kind that makes the skin crawl. The officers had found nothing. No cars lined up, no circle of white-robed figures, no burning cross. Just an empty stretch of highway and a set of tire tracks in the mud that could belong to any number of passing cars. The official line the next morning was that it was mass hysteria, a stress-fueled collective hallucination brought on by severe weather and low visibility. Multiple witnesses, same illusions. That's what they put in the report, and on paper, that explanation fits neatly. But the picture on the news a few days later didn't fit that neat narrative. I was in a truck stop booth outside Little Rock when the anchor came on, and I nearly dropped my mug. The screen showed the smoldering ruins of a compound in rural Arkansas, flames gutted, charred skeletons of buildings still fuming. The reporter said investigators had found the remains of more than 300 people in what looked like a mass suicide ritual. The compound belonged to a religious group led by a man named Jeremiah Blackwood. They said the compound fire had been set deliberately, that most victims were found in the main temple area. They'd found vehicles registered to the cult's members abandoned along Interstate 40, arranged exactly as I'd seen, neat rows on the shoulder near mile marker 247. The report said the compound had burned around midnight, but my watch had read past 1 when I drove through their formation. Either the timeline was wrong, or I'd seen something others couldn't. The official cause of death was smoke inhalation and burns. Investigators speculated that during the chaos of the storm, people could have gathered at the highway at different times, perhaps fleeing the compound or trying to draw others in. But I remembered the chanting, the dry man who stood in the rain without a single drop on his clothing, the way he looked at me like he'd been expecting me all along. That did not fit a tired, disoriented crowd trying to escape. After that night, I refused to run that stretch of I-40 if I could help it. Whenever dispatch tried to assign me a load that would take me through Arkansas, I found a reason to reroute. Other drivers laughed it off, called me superstitious. I don't blame them. Ghosts and burning crosses sound like stories you tell at a diner to make the coffee taste better. But I still wake up sometimes with the chant ringing in my ears, and those white faces turning toward my headlights like pale statues. I replay that man's words in my head more than I should. He called me Sister Evelyn. He said the storm was a sign and that the faithful must be taken before the cleansing. That line sits in my chest like a stone. How did he know my name? How did a man in a storm know my truck, my handle, my route? The whole thing feels like a bruise. Something that hurts if you press the wrong spot. Weeks after the news reports, I met a trooper who'd been on the case. He was a plain man, tired and respectful, and he told me things that made hair stand up on my arms. Jeremiah Blackwood had built a following out of fear and prophecy, he said. The compound had been a fortress of ritual. Officers had found journals, audio recordings of sermons, instructions left out for followers. Those vehicles on I-40? The evidence suggested some had been staged, placed on the shoulder to lure passing drivers, maybe even to create a spectacle to convince the undecided to join. He didn't say what any of that meant for me exactly. Just that cults manipulate spectacle, that leaders feed off spectacle, that a burning cross in a rainstorm was a hell of a spectacle. He nodded slowly when I asked him about timelines and why some witnesses claimed to see the crowd after the fire began. Sometimes in things like this, he said, people remember differently, and sometimes in a storm, memory and reality curl together. We could find a lot of explanations. His eyes, though, didn't sound as certain as his words. I keep thinking about the little things that didn't feel right. The bit of dry clothing he wore when everything soaked through, the way the candles stayed lit, the way the chanting fell away the instant that man raised his hand. Those details don't fit neatly into an official report. They sit outside the tidy boxes of investigation. They are the corners of the picture that remain dark. I don't preach about it. I don't stand on a soapbox telling other drivers to avoid that stretch. I drive my loads, take my breaks, keep my voice level on the CB. But I never forget the sight of that cross burning against the rain, the rows of cars like a makeshift cathedral, the faces of people who seemed more like statues than flesh. I don't forget the way a man looked at me through a closed window and knew a name I hadn't said aloud. If you're out on the road and a storm blows up, take care. There are things the highway makes room for that don't belong in daylight. Sometimes they come dressed as faith, sometimes as community. The highway connects us all, drivers, passengers, strangers. But it also links us to the places people choose to bring their beliefs, even the terrible ones. For me, that night under the lightning will always be a line I cross with caution. I drive past it now like a place with a locked gate. I don't linger. Some places on the map are better left to their own dark. My name is Daniel Reyes, and for the past 15 years I've been hauling freight across some of the loneliest stretches of highway this country has to offer. I've spent more nights staring at white and yellow lines than I can count, watching the world roll by through a bug-splattered windshield. And in all that time, I've seen my share of strange things out here, shapes in the dark that didn't belong, shadows crossing empty highways, voices over the CB that cut out mid-sentence. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the night I got a warning over the radio that still rattles around in my head every time I fire up the engine. It was a Tuesday evening, late October. The air had that brittle, dry chill. Nevada is known for once the sun dips low, and I had just picked up a load of construction equipment out of Reno, bound for a site outside Denver. Dispatch made it clear this wasn't just another job. This was urgent freight. So instead of taking one of the longer routes through Utah, I decided to cut straight across Nevada on Highway 50. Most truckers avoid that route unless they absolutely have to. Highway 50 has a reputation. They don't call it the loneliest road in America for nothing. It's 300 miles of empty desert, long stretches of sagebrush, abandoned filling stations from the 1960s, and the occasional mangled carcass of a coyote or deer cooked dry in the sun. By the time I'd been rolling for 6 hours, the sun was bleeding down into the western mountains. My CB had been dead quiet most of the day, just the occasional dispatcher check-in or weather update, nothing special. I was making good time, rig cruising steady at 70 mph, just me, the hum of the tires, and the low throb of the engine. The CB was turned up just enough to catch a warning about smoky bears or debris on the road, and that's when I heard him. Breaker 19, Breaker 19. This is Big Joe calling any eastbound drivers on Highway 50. Y'all got your ears on? The second I heard his voice, I sat up straighter. Everyone on the long-haul circuit knew Big Joe. He'd been driving for 30 years, maybe more, and his voice was unmistakable, low and gravelly, like a diesel engine that had smoked a pack of Camels. He was a legend, a man who knew every shortcut, every truck stop, and every cop hiding spot between California and Maine. I grabbed the mic. "Big Joe, this is Lone Rider. I copy you loud and clear. Where you at?" Joe came back, calm but sharp. "Good to hear a friendly voice out here, brother. Now listen close. You need to keep your eyes open tonight. Something ain't right on this stretch. Been hearing too many reports from drivers this week about things on the road that don't belong there." I frowned and instinctively checked my mirrors. Nothing but dark asphalt disappearing behind me, empty to the horizon. "What kind of things, Joe? You talking wildlife? Bears in the dumpsters again?" Static fizzed across the line before his voice came back, more serious than before. "Not bears, not wildlife. Truckers say they're seeing a phantom 18-wheeler trailing them out here. No company logos, no plates, no driver visible, just headlights. And when they try to reach out on the CB..." He paused. Nothing. Dead air. A shiver crawled over my arms, though the cab was warm. Big Joe wasn't the type to spread campfire ghost stories. If he was telling me this, he believed it. "I appreciate the heads up, Joe. I'll keep my eyes peeled. You do that, Lone Rider. And hear me, if you see anything strange, don't stop for nothing. Keep that hammer down till you reach civilization. You're about 3 minutes from mile marker 142. That's where most of the sightings have been happening." Then silence. Just me, the road, and my own heartbeat thumping low, louder than the engine. I checked my GPS. Mile 142 was just ahead. My grip on the wheel tightened as the last streaks of daylight bled away. The desert looked different now, meaner somehow. The Joshua trees along the highway leaned inward in the dark, their twisted limbs clawing toward the road like skeletal hands. Off in the distance, the shapes of broken-down buildings dotted the horizon. Gas stations long abandoned, windows like hollow sockets staring out into nothing. This was the kind of country where people vanished without leaving a footprint, where there was no cell service, and help, if it came at all, was hours away. Sure enough, mile marker 142 flashed in my headlights. I slowed slightly, scanning both ahead and behind. Nothing. Just asphalt stretching into black infinity. And then, the temperature in my cab dropped. The heater was running, but my breath fogged the windshield. Goosebumps prickled across my arms. Confused, I reached for the climate control. That's when my eye caught movement in the passenger side mirror. Headlights. 2 perfect circles of light, about half a mile back. They were closing the distance fast. My gut twisted. I hadn't passed another vehicle for over an hour. My mirrors had been empty for miles. Now suddenly, here it was, gaining on me. I pressed down on the accelerator. My engine roared as the speedometer climbed past 75, but the lights kept gaining, brighter and brighter in my mirror. And then I saw it, the outline of another 18-wheeler. Except, something was wrong. The headlights were too bright, like stadium floodlights tearing through the desert night. And worse, there was no sound. At highway speeds, a semi announces itself. You hear the rumble of the engine, the hiss of the air brakes, the whine of gears. But this rig was completely silent. I snatched the CB mic. "Breaker 19, this is Lone Rider, eastbound truck behind." "Me on Highway 50, you got your ears on?" Only static. The phantom rig was now maybe 200 yards behind and closing fast. I could see the cab clearly, and my blood turned to ice. It was empty. No driver silhouetted in the cab, no dash lights glowing, no shadow moving behind the wheel, just an empty truck barreling down on me, those white-hot headlights locked onto my trailer like the eyes of a predator. I slammed my rig harder, the speedometer climbing past 80, Engine screaming, oil burning hot. My hands trembled on the wheel, but I couldn't let go, not now. The CB crackled alive suddenly, voices overlapping in chaos. Anybody else seeing this thing? It's on my bumper, no driver in the cab. Sweet Jesus, it just went through a guardrail, like it wasn't even there. Then Big Joe's voice cut through the static like a knife. Lone Rider, you copy? You gotta get to the Old Pony Express station at mile marker 1 and 56. That's the only safe spot between here and the state line. Don't let it catch you in the open desert. You hear me? Don't stop. My heart lurched. I knew that place. I'd passed it before. A crumbling stone building from the 1800s, turned into a roadside rest stop with a couple picnic tables and an info sign. Just 8 miles up. But in my mirror, the phantom truck was less than 50 yards behind me. Close enough now I could see rust streaks down its trailer, mud flaps swaying in a wind I couldn't feel. Still no driver. No plates. No markings. Just a rolling steel coffin, silent as the grave. Every bump in the highway sent shudders through my rig as I pushed it harder than it was ever meant to go. And still, that nightmare machine stayed locked on my tail like it was chained to me. At last, headlights swept over the outline of the Old Pony Express station, a beacon in the dark. I downshifted hard, engine brakes screaming as I swung off the hide, into the gravel lot. And just like that, the temperature in the cab snapped back to normal. I checked my mirrors. Nothing. The road behind was empty, black and endless. The phantom truck was gone. I sat there, hands white-knuckled around the wheel, heart hammering. My engine idled, the only sound in the night. The CB popped once, then came Big Joe's voice, calm but low. You made it to the station, Lone Rider. Yeah, I'm here. My throat was dry. What the hell was that thing? Joe was silent for a moment before answering. That brother was Johnny Mercer. He used to run this stretch regular about 15 years back, until his rig went off the road near mile 142 in '09. They never found his body, just the burned-out wreck at the bottom of a ravine. Some folks say Johnny's still out here, trying to finish his last haul. I didn't move the rest of the night, just parked there in that gravel lot, too shaken to put the truck back in gear. When dawn broke, I finally got back on the road and finished the run into Denver. But that night, I made myself a promise. I would never again drive Highway 50 after dark. Some roads belong to the living, others belong to the dead. The smart trucker learns the difference. That was 3 years ago. I've kept my promise. But sometimes late at night when I flip on the CB, I still hear Big Joe warning other drivers about the phantom truck. And sometimes, when the static gets thick, I hear the frantic voices of truckers who didn't take the warning seriously. The dead don't rest easy on America's highways, and Johnny Mercer is still out there, silent, relentless, chasing 18-wheelers through the Nevada night, looking for someone unlucky enough to share his eternal ride. My name is Raymond Cole, though on the highways most folks just call me Ray. I've been behind the wheel of 18-wheelers for close to 20 years now, most of that time practically living out of my rig. In that time, I've given rides to plenty of hitchhikers, some good company, some downright odd, but I always figured it was worth giving people a chance. That was until one stormy night when the stranger I let into my truck nearly took my life. It was late October, rain coming down in sheets as I drove through the winding hills of West Virginia on Route 33. The storm had swept in suddenly, hammering the road with a cold, relentless downpour. My wipers fought to keep up, but visibility was bad, and the slick asphalt made every curve nerve-wracking. I was almost done with my haul from Nashville up to Pittsburgh and counting the miles until I could park the rig, spend a day at home, and see my wife before heading back out again. Rounding a bend near a dimly lit gas station, I caught sight of a figure standing on the shoulder. He was drenched, shivering, thumbs stuck out into the storm. I felt that old instinct to help flare up. I eased the truck onto the gravel and climbed down, rain soaking me instantly. "Need a lift?" I called. The young man looked up, face pale under the flickering light. "Please, sir. Just a ride to the next town," he said, voice trembling. I didn't think twice. "Hop in. No use standing out here in this mess." Inside the cab, I got a better look at him. Thin frame, clothes ripped and filthy, a faint smell of smoke clinging to his jacket. He said his name was Ethan, a drifter on his way back to see family. His words sounded harmless enough, but something in the way he carried himself unsettled me. For the first few miles, neither of us spoke much. The rain pounding on the windshield and the steady rumble of the engine filled the silence. I tried to make small talk, asking where he'd been, where he was headed. But his answers were short, vague. His eyes darted around like he was expecting something to appear out of the darkness. I told myself I was just tired from the long haul, but a knot of unease started growing in my gut. About 30 miles in, as we entered a narrow mountain pass where the road coiled between towering trees, Ethan finally broke the silence. "There's something you ought to know about these roads," he said softly. I glanced over. "And what's that?" "Not everybody makes it out alive." The words hit colder than the rain beating down outside. "What do you mean?" I asked. He kept staring out the passenger window. "There's someone out here. A man who watches the highways. Been killing people for years. Nobody knows where he comes from or where he goes. He leaves bodies in the woods. Folks just vanish." I gave a short laugh, trying to brush it off. Sounds like one of those campfire ghost stories. Ethan's lips curled in a small smile, but it didn't touch his eyes. "I'm dead serious, and I'm not sure you should be driving this stretch tonight." Something about the way he said it made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Was he just trying to scare me? Or was there more to it? My instincts, honed by decades of road experience, whispered danger. Then, as if on cue, my CB radio crackled to life. Through heavy static, a faint voice bled through, weak, desperate, calling for help. I grabbed the mic, tried to answer, but all I got was more static. Ethan leaned closer, his breath hot against my ear. "They found me," he whispered. I jerked my head toward him. "Who?" His eyes flicked to mine, dark and haunted. "The man. He's after me." My pulse hammered as dread spread through me. Had I just let trouble climb into my cab? I demanded he explain. His story tumbled out in disjointed fragments. Claims of being a survivor, of witnessing horrific things done by some serial killer who hunted travelers along lonely mountain roads. He spoke of shadows, of watching friends die, of running for his life. But as the miles ticked by, something didn't sit right. He knew far too many details about the victims, describing things no survivor should know. Details about their last moments, their pain, their fear. When I pressed him, his answers grew slippery, and that smell of smoke on his jacket seemed stronger now, mingled with the sight of fresh scratches on his hands. I finally asked the question burning in my mind. "Ethan, how exactly did you escape this killer?" For a long time, he stayed quiet, staring at the forest whipping past in the headlights. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost the tremor, replaced by something colder. "Who said I escaped?" A chill rippled through the cab. I stared at him, and in his eyes I saw no fear, no desperation, only hunger, sharp and calculating. "You see, Ray," he said, and my blood froze because I had never told him my name. "I've been watching you for miles, waiting for the right moment. You truckers are all the same, always willing to help a stranger." I pressed harder on the gas, the speedometer climbing past 70. My grip on the wheel tightened until my knuckles whitened. Ethan chuckled, low and broken, like glass cracking. "There's no phantom killer out here. There's just me. And I've been very busy. The CB radio hissed again, and this time what came through stopped my heart. It was my own voice, faint and distorted, calling for help. Ethan pulled a small recorder from his pocket and smiled. Amazing, isn't it? That call you heard earlier wasn't real. That vow is from my last ride. Poor bastard didn't make it far. Through the rain, I spotted lights ahead, the glow of a truck stop near mile marker 156. Salvation. If I could reach it, get near people, maybe I had a chance. But Ethan must have read my thoughts. Go ahead. Pull in if you want. I've done this before. It always looks like an accident. Driver fell asleep. Mechanical failure. Nobody ever suspects the hitchhiker who slips away before the cops arrive. The lights were less than a mile away now, cutting through the mist. But then his hand moved inside his jacket and I caught the flash of metal. The thing about you truckers, he continued, almost casual, is you're ghosts on the road. Nobody knows where you are from hour to hour. Sometimes you just vanish, and nobody notices for days. That was the breaking point. Instead of turning toward the truck stop, I yanked the wheel hard to the right. The rig smashed through the guardrail and went plummeting down a steep embankment, trailer jackknifing as sparks and steel screamed around us. The impact slammed Ethan into the door with a bone-jarring thud. My seatbelt kept me pinned, though the force knocked the wind out of me. When the chaos finally stilled, I turned. Ethan was slumped, blood dripping from his temple. I grabbed the CB, voice ragged. Mayday, mayday, this is Raymond Cole. I need immediate assistance at mile marker 156 on Route 33. I've got a suspected killer in my cab. The reply came fast. Within minutes, flashing red and blue lights lit up the rain-soaked highway above. Troopers rappelled down with weapons drawn. They dragged Ethan out, cuffed him, and began searching. What they uncovered froze every man there. On him, they found a collection of driver's licenses belonging to truckers missing for years, along with notebooks filled with detailed accounts, dates, locations, methods, even where he'd hid it, and bodies. 15 drivers, maybe more, had vanished into the night because of him. His real name was Ethan Kearns, and he had been using the highways as his personal hunting ground for years. The investigators told me I was lucky. Ethan's mistake had been revealing himself too soon. Most of his victims never even knew what was happening until it was too late. I testified at his trial months later. Families of his victims sat in the gallery, their grief filling the courtroom. When the guilty verdict was read, Ethan just smiled that same empty smile I'd first seen in my cab. He was sentenced to life with no parole. Some family members shouted, the judge banging his gavel for order, but Ethan never stopped smiling. The aftermath left scars I still carry. For weeks I slept with a baseball bat next to my bed. Every sound outside, every late-night phone ring, set my nerves on edge. I reinforced my truck doors, carried pepper spray, kept my CB tuned to the emergency channel, and I swore never to pick up a hitchhiker again. Even now, years later, I avoid stopping at dark rest areas unless I have no choice. When I do, I park where I can see everything. I keep moving whenever possible, because sometimes the safest place really is behind the wheel. Not long after the trial, I was driving those same West Virginia roads when I saw another lone figure standing in the rain, thumb raised. My chest tightened, but I didn't slow down. I kept my eyes forward, hands steady on the wheel. In the mirror, I watched the figure disappear into the night. This life on the road is lonely, but the dangers hiding out there aren't written in any handbook. Sometimes those dangers wear a smile, ask for a ride, and look just like the people you're trying to help. That night taught me that evil doesn't always come wearing a mask. Sometimes it's just a young man with tired eyes and a story too good to be true. The man I thought I was rescuing had been hunting me all along, and I'll never forget it. Even now, I carry a newspaper clipping with the faces of Ethan's victims. 15 drivers who never made it home. I see them every time I climb into my cab, A reminder that I owe it to them, and to myself, never to let my guard down again. So if you're out there, hauling freight across the long, dark highways, remember this: trust your instincts. Compassion can be a strength, but it can also blind you. Because sometimes the person begging for your help isn't a victim at all. Sometimes they're the predator, and you're the prey. My name is Carla Jennings, though most drivers out on the highways just call me Red Carla. I've been behind the wheel of an 18-wheeler for 12 years now, hauling everything from frozen produce to heavy machinery across all 48 states. The road has been my office, my home, and on some nights when the world felt too heavy, it's been my sanctuary. I thought I'd seen it all. The wrecks, the late-night hustlers, the violent storms, the kind of darkness that makes the open road feel endless. But nothing could have prepared me for what I stumbled into 3 years ago. To this day, it makes my skin crawl just to think about it. It was a Thursday evening in late September. I was finishing a brutal run from Atlanta up to Detroit. 14 hours behind the wheel without a proper break, pushing a refrigerated load that couldn't afford delays. My body ached with the familiar grinding pain of long-haul trucking. The dull vibration of the diesel engine worked into my bones. My eyes burned from staring at endless ribbons of asphalt. My lower back felt like it had been pounded with a hammer. By the time I pulled into a truck stop just outside Indianapolis, I was running on fumes, both the rig and me. It was one of those massive, sprawling complexes we drivers know too well. Acres of parking under harsh sodium lights, rows of big rigs sleeping in their slots, each humming like a giant beast at rest. There was the Diesel Island, a convenience store, a line of showers, and a 24-hour diner where the coffee could raise the dead. Most importantly, it was a safe spot. A place where drivers could log their mandatory rest without worrying about DOT inspectors or highway patrols hassling them. I backed my rig into a space near the far end of the lot, away from the noise of trucks constantly rolling in and out. The dashboard clock read 11:47 p.m. when I shut the engine down. Silence settled over the cab like a blanket. After finishing up my log entries and walking a circle around my trailer for inspection, I grabbed my wallet and headed for the main building. Coffee, maybe a sandwich, then a shower, and finally 10 hours of shut-eye. The night air was cool, crisp. Diesel fumes hung heavy, mixed with fried food from the diner's vent. It wasn't unpleasant, not for me. For a trucker, that smell is almost like home. I stretched my shoulders, thinking about how good a hot shower would feel on my aching back. That's when I saw it. At the far edge of the parking lot, tucked deep into the shadows beyond the reach of the overhead lights, a small cluster of vehicles sat bunched together. In the center was a dark blue minivan, flanked on either side by 2 sedans and an older pickup truck. Now, vehicles at truck stops aren't unusual. Not everyone there is a trucker. Families stop, couples stop, hell, even hitchhikers manage to get dropped off. But what caught my eye wasn't the vehicles. It was the people. Even from 50 yards away, something about their body language was off. Too many adults for a normal traveling family. They weren't relaxing, stretching, or chatting like you'd expect. They were watching, glancing around nervously, keeping their voices low, always positioning themselves to block any line of sight into that van. I slowed my walk, uneasy, told myself it was none of my business. Truck stops attract all kinds: dealers, hustlers, prostitutes, drifters. Not everyone there's playing it straight. I knew the smart thing was to mind my business, grab my food, take my shower, get my sleep. But then I heard it. At first it was faint, almost lost under the hum of idling diesel engines, a soft, broken whimper, the sound of a child crying. And it was coming from the direction of that minivan. The sound hit me like a fist. I've got 2 girls of my own back home in Texas. Hearing a child cry, really cry, that terrified, helpless kind of sobbing, it trips a switch inside you. Maternal instinct, primal, whatever you want to call it. My stomach knotted. My heart started thudding. I veered off course, walking casually but angling toward that group, trying to act like I was just stretching my legs. The closer I got, the worse the scene looked. The van's windows were tinted almost black. Couldn't see in, but there were shadows shifting inside. Small shapes, children. And the adults standing guard? They weren't the type you'd want to meet in a well-lit room, let alone in the shadows of a truck stop. Hard, predatory faces, eyes that scanned and measured like they were hunting. Shoulders tight, jaws clenched. One of them spotted me. Tall, skinny guy, greasy hair, tattoos crawling down both arms. His gaze locked on me, sharp as a blade. His whole demeanor changed from alert to openly hostile in a heartbeat. "You lost, lady," he called out, stepping forward to intercept me. My gut screamed danger, but I forced myself to keep my stride steady, projecting a confidence I didn't feel. "Just heading to the store," I said, nodding toward the main building. "The store's that way," he shot back, jabbing his finger toward the opposite direction of their little huddle. His voice had that edge, the kind that isn't a suggestion, but a warning. And then it came again, louder this time. A child's sob, sharp and terrified. No mistaking it, no brushing it off as imagination. Ice water ran through my veins. That wasn't the whine of a cranky kid. That was desperation, pure, unfiltered fear. "I know where the store is," I told him, keeping my voice as even as I could. "Been stopping here for years." His eyes narrowed. His hand slipped toward his jacket pocket, and I didn't need a cease. He can guess about what he might have tucked in there. "Then you should get going. Nothing to see over here." I didn't argue, just nodded and kept walking toward the main building, but inside my mind was racing. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone, dialed 911, the line connected, and dropped me into an automated hold system. Local emergency lines were overloaded. No one was answering. Panic pressed at me, but I shoved it down. Inside the diner, near the back booth, I spotted 3 familiar faces. Fellow drivers I'd run into more than once over the years. Tommy Alvarez, Rick Johnson, and Lisa Chen. Good people, experienced, smart, no nonsense. I slid into the booth beside Lisa, voice low but urgent, and spilled everything I'd just seen and heard. The look on their faces said it all. Hard, grim recognition. "Human trafficking," Rick muttered, his jaw tight. "Been cropping up more and more at truck stops. These scumbags know it's the perfect cover. Nobody questions cars parked in the shadows. Nobody pays attention. Too much transient traffic, too easy to blend in." "Did you get a plate number?" Tommy asked. "No," I admitted. "Too dark, and they were already suspicious of me." Lisa was already on her phone, her expression cold and focused. "I know someone who does security here. If anyone can move quick, it's him." While she made her call, Rick filled me in on how these operations usually ran. Kids moved at night, ordinary-looking vehicles shuffled from city to city. Truck stops were gold mines for them. Food, bathrooms, fuel, no cameras, no one watching too close. "The worst part?" he added, voice low. "Half the time these kids don't even run to cops when they get the chance. They've been groomed, brainwashed, taught to think law enforcement will hurt them, or worse, send them back." Lisa snapped her phone shut. "Security's checking it out right now. Quiet. The cops are on the way." The next 20 minutes crawled like hours. We nursed coffees we didn't taste, all of us watching the windows. Finally, without sirens, without lights, 3 patrol cars rolled silently into the lot. Engines low, headlights dim. And then, everything broke loose. Police fanned out fast, surrounding the cluster of vehicles. Orders barked, flashlights slicing through the dark. "Hands where we can see 'em! Step away from the vehicle!" Chaos. Shouting. 2 of the men bolted, only to be tackled hard and cuffed. The others froze, caught like rats. Then the van doors swung open. What spilled out made even the veteran cops turn pale. 7 children, cramped into that van like cargo, ages 8 to maybe 14. Dirty, thin, eyes wide with terror. The kind of fear you don't forget once you see it. Some didn't speak English. Some couldn't speak at all. But their faces said everything. Terror, hunger, exhaustion. The cries that had drawn me there in the first place spilled into the night. Louder now, raw, unrestrained. The rest of the night blurred into a whirlwind. FBI agents arrived, medical staff, social workers. The kids were taken out one by one, wrapped in blankets, ushered into waiting vans bound for safety. The suspects were cuffed, searched, and shoved into patrol cars. By dawn, the lot looked normal again, but nothing about that night was normal. I gave my statement, every detail I could remember. An FBI agent pulled me aside later, told me plain, "You might have saved those kids' lives tonight. If that van had left, they'd be ghosts by morning. We never would have found them." The news reported it, of course, but carefully. Multi-state trafficking ring busted. Several arrests made. Children rescued. No details. No mention of the sobs in the dark. No mention of how close they came to vanishing forever. But I knew, and I couldn't shake it. I kept in touch with the agent for months. Learned that the scum they caught that night weren't even the top dogs, just low-level transporters. But their arrests led to bigger fish. Raids, more rescues, more kids pulled out of the nightmare. It should have felt like victory, but to me, it was hollow. Those 7 kids were just a drop in an ocean of lost children. For every van stopped, 10 more slipped through. That night changed me. I can't roll into a truck stop without scanning the lot now. Every time I see kids with adults who don't look right, my hand twitches toward my phone. My fellow drivers tease me sometimes. Mother Hen, they call me. Always watching, always warning. But I'll wear that name like armor, because I've seen what happens when no one's watching. The highways aren't just ribbons of freedom anymore. They're battlegrounds. Some nights, they're hunting grounds. And in the shadows, evil moves like any other cargo, hidden in plain sight. Those 7 kids got another chance because one exhausted trucker paid attention. Sometimes being a hero doesn't mean jumping in front of a bullet. Sometimes it just means refusing to look away. I still run that Atlanta to Detroit route, still stop at that same truck stop outside Indianapolis. But every time I park and walk toward the diner, I remember those faces, eyes too old for their years, tears carving tracks in the dirt on their cheeks. And I remember the sound, that desperate sob in the dark, the kind of sound that makes your blood turn cold. It reminds me why I keep looking, why I keep listening. Because on these highways, it isn't just freight that's being moved, it's lives. And sometimes, all it takes is one driver caring enough to make a call to change everything. My name's Linda Carter, though on the CB most folks just call me LC. 16 years I've been driving 18-wheeler across this country, and in all that time I thought I had seen just about everything the road could throw at me. Ice storms that locked whole interstates, dust devils spinning through the desert, drunk drivers swerving into my lane, even a tornado that touched down less than a mile from where I was hauling freight. But nothing, not even my wildest nightmare, prepared me for the night my GPS stopped being a tool and started being something else. Something alive. Something that led me into a place I should never have gone. It was late October. The kind of night where frost gathers on your mirrors like spider webs, and the moon hides behind thin clouds that never quite stop moving. My trailer was packed with electronics headed for Denver, and I left Portland right on schedule, steering my Kenworth east on I-84 through the Columbia River Gorge. That stretch is no stranger to me, I know the way the black cliffs rise up like jagged teeth, how the river below looks like spilled ink, how the fog curls up from the water and creeps across the asphalt. It's beautiful in daylight, but after dark, it's like threading a needle through a giant's ribs. The tires hummed steady. My coffee was hot, and everything felt routine. Around 11, the first flicker happened. My GPS screen froze, blinked, then went black. A second later, it rebooted itself, the words recalculating route flashing bright blue. No big deal, I thought. These things glitch. But when the screen came back, it told me to take exit 168 toward a place I had never heard of before. Hollow Creek. That gave me pause. I've run this route more times than I can count, and I know every exit by heart. I had never once seen a sign for Hollow Creek. I ignored it, kept steady on the highway. But the GPS wasn't done. Another flicker, another recalculation. In 400 yards, take exit 168 toward Hollow Creek, the voice said, sharp as a school teacher correcting a child. My gut clenched. I blew right past the exit without slowing, but the voice came back, firmer. Recalculating. In 200 yards, make a U-turn. That was strange enough. But stranger still, when I glanced up, I realized the exit sign actually did read Hollow Creek. I swore under my breath. I knew damn well no such place existed out here. For the next 20 miles, the pattern repeated. The screen would flicker, the polite voice would reroute me, and every new exit had a name I had never seen in my life. Ash Fork Crossing, Mercy Falls, Grave Light Hollow. Each one sounded less like a town and more like the title of some cheap horror movie. I gripped the wheel tighter and finally reached for the CB. Breaker 19, anyone got eyes on these exits around 170? My Garmin's pulling some real funny business tonight. Static crackled. Then a low, steady voice answered, calm and gravelly, like an old oak tree talking. LC, that you? Redwood Ray here. You best keep rolling straight, don't let that box tell you otherwise. Relief washed over me. Ray's a legend on these roads, been hauling since before I was born. Copy that, Ray. You seeing these exits too? Or is it just my eyes? There was a pause, then he came back, slower. Seeing them, sure. Don't mean they're meant to be seen. Don't take the bait. The way he said it made my skin crawl, like he knew more than he was saying. I laughed nervously, tried to shake it off. Appreciate the heads up. Guess I'll stick to the asphalt I trust. But trust started to feel slippery as the night wore on. The frost thickened on my windshield, my clock hands seemed stuck, and the mile markers didn't add up. I'd pass 192, then 194, then 192 again, My logbook said I'd been driving 3 hours straight, but my gut told me it was more like 10. My coffee was gone, yet I couldn't remember finishing it. Then came the voices. Not on the CB, through the GPS itself. Faint at first, like whispers under the recalculating tone. I leaned closer and I swear I heard someone say my name. Not Elsie, not Linda, but the way my mother used to call me as a child, when I'd stayed out past dark. A scolding laced with worry. In 1 mile, the GPS said, calm as ever. Turn left toward Mercy Falls. My knuckles went white. There is no left turn here, I thought. It's a gorge, sheer rock on one side, river on the other. And yet, when my headlights swept the side of the road, there it was. A narrow paved lane sloping down where I knew damn well there should only be boulders. A green sign marked it clear as day. Mercy Falls, 1 mile. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might rattle the steering wheel. Ray! I called on the CB, voice trembling. You catching this? You seeing a left turn down there? Static answered. Then Ray's voice, thinner this time, almost distant. Don't turn. And then nothing. The channel went dead. I kept rolling straight, but my eyes wouldn't stop flicking to that phantom road, half expecting it to grab my truck and pull me off the highway. Hours blurred after that. My odometer ticked forward. But every landmark I expected, the rest stop at Boardman, the way station past Pendleton, never showed. Instead, the exits kept multiplying. Hollow Creek again, Ash Fork again, Mercy Falls again. Over and over like a carousel I couldn't step off. My breath fogged the cab as if the temperature had dropped below freezing, but my dash said it was 40 outside. I tried singing to keep my mind sharp, slapped my face a few times, even pulled at my hair. Didn't matter. The road stretched on, endless and wrong. Somewhere deep in the night, the CB sputtered to life again. Not Ray this time. A woman's voice, soft and broken. "Come home, Linda. You've been gone so long." My throat closed. It was my sister's voice, except my sister had died 12 years ago. I reached out and yanked the power cord from the CB. The silence that followed was almost worse. I told myself to keep moving, to make it to sunrise. But sunrise never came. The sky stayed locked in permanent night, clouds drifting but never thinning, moonlight glowing weak and distant. My dashboard clock spun through hours like a broken fan blade. Midnight, 2 a.m., 6 a.m., then back to 1. Time wasn't just slipping, it was mocking me. At some point I passed a sign that made my blood run cold. It didn't just say Hollow Creek or Mercy Falls, it said Carter's Bend, my last name. I nearly slammed the brakes. The sign had been freshly painted, reflective, official, but I knew there was no such place, and there never had been. The GPS chimed cheerfully. "In 200 yards, take exit toward Carter's Bend." I screamed at it then, hoarse and furious, cursing it like it was a living thing. But the voice only repeated, calm and patient. "In 200 yards, take exit toward Carter's Bend." When I blew past it, the screen didn't scold me. It didn't even flicker. It just showed my little blue arrow circling back, as if no matter how far I drove, Carter's Bend was always 200 yards ahead. I don't know how long I drove after that. Days, weeks, I tried everything. Turning off the GPS, unplugging it, even throwing it on the passenger floor. Didn't matter. The roads kept shifting and the exits kept coming. Once, desperate, I took one. I don't even remember which. Maybe Ash Fork Crossing, maybe something else. The ramp was narrow, the pavement cracked, the trees crowding close. At the bottom, instead of a town, I found rows of trucks, hundreds of them, parked neatly on either side of the road, engines cold, cabs empty, each one with its headlights dark but windshields fogged, like as someone had only just left. I rolled past them, heart hammering, until I saw one I recognized. A blue Peterbilt with a mural of a redwood tree painted across the sleeper cab. Redwood Ray's rig. The driver's door was open, the cab was empty. I hit the brakes so hard my trailer shuddered. I wanted to climb down, to search, to scream his name, but something inside me, some tiny fragile thread of instinct, told me if I left the truck, I'd never make it back. So I floored it, barreling past the endless rows until the road simply bent upward and spat me back on I-84 like nothing had happened. That was the last time I dared take an exit. Now, as I tell you this, I'm still driving. My fuel gauge never drops below half. My logbook is full of empty pages. The CB is unplugged. The GPS is cracked down the middle, but I still hear its voice sometimes, humming through the static of my speakers. In 200 yards, it whispers, take exit toward Carter's Bend. And out of the corner of my eye, I swear I can see the sign. Always 200 yards ahead, always waiting. I'd been driving trucks for 12 years when everything shifted that sweltering August of 2018. Interstate 40 had become my second home. Miles and miles of cracked asphalt and endless horizon through Texas, New Mexico, and Oklahoma. Reefer loads were my bread and butter. Frozen vegetables, meat, dairy, anything that needed to stay cold while rolling from California eastward. The runs paid well, and though my wife Marlene often begged me to find a local job so I could be home with her and our 2 boys, I kept choosing the highway. I told myself it was the money. But if I'm being honest, I craved the solitude. There's a strange comfort in the loneliness of those roads. Just me, the steady hum of the rig beneath me, and whatever chatter or music I piped in through the CB and the phone. I had my rituals. I knew which truck stops had the cleanest showers, which diners served the kind of black coffee strong enough to keep your eyes open at 3 in the morning, which little side lots you could park in without anyone bothering you. Life out there felt organized, neat, structured into mile markers, way stations, and delivery deadlines. That Thursday started out like any other. I'd picked up a trailer full of frozen peas and corn in Bakersfield, headed for Oklahoma City. My deadline was Saturday morning, but I figured I'd push hard and make it by Friday night if the weather held and the reefer stayed steady. The thermometer on my dash had read 104 degrees when I rolled into the way station outside Amarillo around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I remember because I had just hung up the phone with Marlene. She had been reminding me gently that the boys missed me. I told her if I wasn't too tired, I'd push through straight to Oklahoma that night. The way station wasn't crowded. 8, maybe 9 rigs lined up for inspection. I eased into my lane and settled in to wait when a white pickup pulled up alongside my cab. Government plates. Out steps a man in his mid-40s, clean cut, wearing a yellow safety vest over a blue polo shirt. A badge clipped to his pocket glinted in the sun. He carried a clipboard and walked up to my passenger door, knocking politely but firmly. "Federal safety compliance check," he said, his tone all business. "New regulation went into effect last month. We're inspecting cab emergency equipment. Won't take more than 5 minutes." Now, I'd been through more inspections than I could count, but it was always DOT officers in uniform, not some guy in a polo with a clipboard. Still, he looked the part. He even showed me a letter on Department of Transportation letterhead, complete with a stamped signature, said they were contracting private inspectors to move things along faster, something about a string of accidents tied to improperly mounted fire extinguishers. He rattled off regulation codes like he knew them by heart. The way he tapped his pen against his clipboard, checking his watch, sighing like he'd rather be anywhere else. It felt like every government worker I'd ever met. So against my better judgment, I unlocked the passenger door and let him climb inside. That was my mistake. He started moving methodically through the cab, running his hands along surfaces, checking off items as he went. Fire extinguisher, emergency triangles, first aid kit. I noticed he had this odd habit of dragging his fingers along every edge, like he was feeling for something invisible. His touch lingered just a little too long, almost like he wasn't checking for dust, like he was memorizing the space. Then he pulled out a roll of small holographic silver stickers, each about an inch square. He peeled one off and pressed it firmly to the bottom corner of my passenger window. "Inspection passed," he said with a thin smile. He held it there for a good 10 seconds, pressing hard like it had to fuse with the glass. The sticker shimmered under the sun, letters too tiny to read from where I sat, a faint serial number or code etched into it. When he stepped back to admire it, it was like he was hanging a framed photograph, making sure it sat perfectly straight. While he worked, he asked me questions. At first, they seemed harmless enough. How many hours had I been driving today? When was my last rest break? Did I ever get neck pain from the vibrations of the cab? Standard chatter. But then he asked something that cut right through me. "Do you usually sleep in your cab, or do you get motels?" I hesitated. "Mostly the cab. Saves me cash." He nodded and scribbled something on his clipboard. "Smart," he said softly, almost approving. Then, as if he couldn't resist, he reached into his vest and pulled out a length of cord, maybe 3 feet long, loops tied neatly at both ends. "This is a new security device we're recommending," he explained, threading it through his hands. "Wrap it around the inside door handle while you sleep. Keeps thieves from jimmying the lock." He offered it to me with a little flourish. The material was strange, waxy, not quite rope, not quite cable. It left a faint residue on my fingers. I turned it over in my hands. Something about it felt wrong. He watched me carefully, his gaze too intense, his lips pressed tight. Want me to show you the proper technique? Maximum effectiveness? There was something about the way he said it. His eyes fixed not on the cord, but on my throat. I forced a polite smile and handed it back. I'll figure it out, or just a second. His mask slipped, his jaw locked, knuckles whitening around the clipboard. A muscle twitched in his cheek. His breathing quickened like he was restraining himself. Then, just as fast, he forced a smile. Suit yourself. He climbed back down, walked slowly to his pickup, and sat there for 5 long minutes, staring at my rig without moving. Finally, he drove off. I kept rolling east, made Oklahoma City without a hitch, dropped my load, picked up another, but the whole drive, that man's face stayed with me, the silver sticker glinting in my window like a brand, the cord sitting heavy on my dashboard. At a Flying J outside Weatherford, I ran into an old friend, Pete Larson, been hauling almost as long as me. Over burnt coffee, I told him about the inspector, his face drained of color. Same guy, Pete whispered. White pickup, yellow vest. Gave me one of those cords too, showed me how to wrap it, yanked it tight like he was showing off. The way he looked at me, Sandy, like he was picturing it around my neck. We compared notes. Both of us had those holographic stickers on our windows. Pete tilted his so the fluorescent light hit it just right. That's when we saw it. Tiny etched numbers. Coordinates. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured that man staring at my truck from his pickup. Around 2 in the morning, I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through trucker forums. Buried deep in one thread, I found a post. Anyone else run into a safety inspector in a white pickup? The driver's name was listed as Dave Kincaid. The post was 2 weeks old. Replies trickled beneath it. At least 6 other drivers saying they'd met the same man. Same badge, same stickers, same cord. But what made my blood run cold was this. Dave hadn't posted since. He'd been a daily contributor. Then nothing. Silence. I searched other names for the thread. 2 more had gone quiet after sharing their stories. Drivers who had once been active vanished without a word. By 4 a.m., I was dialing an old contact, Eddie Morales, a veteran trucker who always seemed to know the gossip before it hit the news. Eddie's voice was heavy when he picked up. 3 dead, he said before I could explain. All found in their cabs. State police said natural causes at first. Heart attacks, strokes. But I got family and dispatch. Each one strangled. Same kind of cord. And every one of them had those damn silver stickers. The world tilted beneath me. I pulled into a police station by sunrise, the cord sealed in a plastic grocery bag on my passenger seat. The detective who met me, Detective Ramos, dark circles under her eyes, coffee stain down her sleeve, took one look at the sticker on my window and barked for backup. Within an hour, forensics had my rig taped off. They scraped the sticker with delicate tools, photographed every angle, logged the etched code. Ramos showed me photos I'll never forget. Truckers slumped in their bunks, cords digging into their necks, faces purple. Each one a mirror of the cord sitting inches from my own hands. The killer's method was meticulous. He marked drivers with those stickers, embedding GPS coordinates so he could track them. He asked the right questions during his inspections. Who slept in their cab? Who stayed at motels? Who would be alone at night? He gave them the weapon himself, disguised as protection. Then he waited. I gave them every detail I could recall. His severe part in his brown hair, the scar that cut through his eyebrow, the way he held his shoulders like a soldier who couldn't relax. They built a sketch from my description. Detective Ramos said I was lucky. His pattern was clear. He came back within 72 hours. I'd been marked. 2 days later, They caught him at a rest stop near Albuquerque, sitting in his pickup, staring at a parked truck he'd tagged the day before. His name was Danny L. Price, a former DOT employee fired for inappropriate conduct. Later, they uncovered the truth: his obsession with trucker vulnerabilities, his detailed reports that read more like murder blueprints than safety suggestions. In his pickup, they found 14 more cords, a stack of counterfeit stickers, and notebooks cataloging drivers like prey, routes, habits, sleep patterns, scores out of 10 for how easy they'd be to kill. He'd already taken 7 men. I never went back to long haul after that. I found local work, home every night. Safe for sure, but sometimes I still pass rest stops on I-40 and see trucks idling in the dark, drivers asleep inside, windows glittering with stickers. I wonder how many would unlock their door for a man with a clipboard and a calm smile. That square outline still clings to my passenger window, a faint ghost of the sticker they scraped away. Marlene tells me to replace the glass, but I can't. It's my reminder. Not everyone who claims to be keeping you safe actually is. The rig had been our home for over a decade. 11 years of crisscrossing the country, hauling everything from fresh produce to electronics, sleeping in truck stop lots under buzzing sodium lights, and living out of a cab that smelled faintly of diesel and coffee no matter how much we scrubbed it down. My wife Marlene handled the paperwork, the logs, the calls to dispatch. I did the bulk of the driving. It was a good rhythm, a partnership built on trust and routine. By late September of 2016, we were veterans of the Denver to Chicago route. Interstate 80 was practically carved into my brain. I knew every stretch of it, every speed trap, every diner with decent coffee. We'd been running that load twice a month for 3 years, and the familiarity was almost comforting. You could go on autopilot and still feel safe, but that particular run, nothing about it felt safe. We'd rolled out of Denver that Thursday morning with a trailer full of sporting goods. The CB radio crackled the way it always did, with drivers swapping weather updates and cop warnings, sharing dumb jokes to break the monotony. But weaving in and out of the chatter was a voice we'd grown used to over the past year. A driver who went by Blackbird. Blackbird's voice was slow, deliberate, almost careful, like each word was being weighed before it was released. He drove a black Peterbilt with tall chrome stacks that gleamed like polished knives. At night, in your rear view, those stacks looked like fangs bearing down on you. We'd bumped into him a handful of times at truck stops, traded small talk over cheap coffee. I never minded him much, but Marlene, she didn't trust him. "He doesn't blink enough," she said once after a brief encounter in Iowa. "And he's always licking his lips, like some reptile tasting the air." I'd laughed it off. Truckers were an odd bunch, and quirks came with the territory. But in hindsight, I wish I'd listened harder to her instincts. That Thursday morning, though, nobody was laughing. The CB waves were electric with talk about another disappearance. A kid named Ryan Whitaker, just 19, vanished 2 nights earlier from a rest area near North Platte. He was the 3rd young man to disappear in less than a month. All of them last seen at truck stops we knew well. The chatter had an edge of fear you don't normally hear from truckers, men and women who'd seen just about everything the road could throw at them. Around noon, we pulled into a pilot station near Sterling to top off the tanks and grab lunch. The place was packed, drivers standing in small circles outside, cigarettes glowing as the talk swirled about the missing. Inside, in the diner section, a veteran named Hank was showing photos on his phone, grainy screenshots from security footage the cops had released. The images showed the missing men, each talking to someone just out of frame. And in each shot, in the background, you could see the faint edge of a black rig, chrome stacks just barely visible. The same stacks we'd all seen in our mirrors at night. No one wanted to say it outright, but you could feel the conclusion hanging heavy in the air. Blackbird. Marlene's hand found mine under the table, her nails biting into my skin. She didn't need to say anything. I could feel her urgency. We decided right then we'd run through straight to Chicago. No unnecessary stops. But the road had other plans. Around 8 that evening, somewhere near Kearney, Nebraska, our engine temp spiked out of nowhere, the needle climbing red, a grinding noise rattling through the cab. I cursed under my breath and eased us off the highway onto a half-dead truck stop that looked like it hadn't seen life in years. Only 2 lights buzzed above the cracked asphalt, spilling long shadows across the lot. We were the only rig there. I popped the hood, flashlight in hand, while Marlene stayed in the cab with the doors locked. My stomach sank when I saw the coolant reservoir bone dry, which made no sense. I checked it that morning. Then I spotted them. Faint tool marks around the drain plug. Like someone had tampered with it. Like someone had loosened it on purpose. That's when I heard the rumble. Deep, throaty, unmistakable. A Peterbilt pulling in slow. I didn't have to turn to know who it was. Blackbird. He parked about 50 feet away. Headlights blazing, engine idling low and steady. His rig looked like a predator crouched in the dark, waiting for its chance to pounce. Through the glare, I could just make out his shape in the cab, sitting perfectly still, watching. My mouth went dry. I forced my hands back to the engine, pretending to tinker, but my chest was tight with panic. Then one of the overhead lights sputtered and died, plunging us into a pocket of shadow. My radio crackled on the dash where Marlene's voice whispered, trembling. He's moving around his trailer. I can see him. Something's dripping from the back. And then the smell hit. Copper, sharp, metallic, mixed with bleach. The wind carried it from his trailer straight to where I stood. I angled my flashlight, the beam slicing the dark, and froze. A thin stream of dark liquid was dripping steadily from the corner of his trailer, pooling on the ground, spreading into a slick, black stain. Blood. My knees went weak. Blackbird stepped into view then, emerging from behind his trailer like he'd been waiting for me to notice. He was wiping his hands on a rag that glistened with that same dark fluid. He didn't hide, didn't explain, just tilted his head, studying me with unblinking eyes. His lips moved soundlessly, like he was rehearsing a script. Marlene must have been calling 911 because I heard her voice faint through the Dio, giving our location, her tone steady, braver than I felt. That's when Blackbird finally spoke. "You folks need some help?" His voice carried clearly in the night, flat and hollow. "Dangerous breaking down out here. Lots of bad people on these roads." The way he said bad people froze the blood in my veins. I backed toward the cab, flashlight still on him. He began walking toward us, slow, deliberate, every step echoing on the pavement. I yanked the driver's door open and practically dove inside. Marlene already had the tire iron in her lap, the engine somehow sputtering to life on what little coolant remained. But Blackbird wasn't done. He planted himself in front of our hood, palms pressing against the metal, that fixed smile stretching across his face. Then he moved toward my door. And that's when the sound started. Banging. From inside his trailer. Muffled at first, then louder, frantic. A voice screaming, pleading, too jumbled to make out the words. Marlene gasped, her hand clamping onto my arm. The smile slid off Blackbird's face. Fury replaced it, his eyes going wide and wild. He bolted toward the trailer, something glinting in his hand. A syringe, maybe a knife. "Drive!" Marlene shouted. I slammed the truck into gear. Tires squealed, the cab shuddered, and we tore out of that lot, clipping a concrete barrier on the way. In the mirror, I saw him standing in the road, watching us disappear. Not chasing, just watching. We pushed the engine harder than I ever had. Steam hissed up from under the hood, the temperature gauge buried, but I didn't care. We hit 90, flying blind down an empty highway, praying the engine would hold. It didn't. 12 miles later, it gave out, coughing us to a dead stop on the shoulder beneath an overpass. Steam billowed like smoke from a dying fire. Marlene was already on the phone with the state police, voice steady as she relayed everything. The black rig, the chrome stacks, the blood, the voice in the trailer. I kept my eyes glued to the mirrors, convinced those fangs of exhaust would reappear at any second. Patrol cars arrived within 15 minutes, lights flashing. A trooper named Officer Grady pulled us aside while others swept the truck stop. He told us we weren't the only ones. Reports of a black Peterbilt had been piling up for weeks. Disappearances too. Always young men, always near the same route. Hours later, near 2 in the morning, Grady came back with the news. They'd found the trailer, abandoned, doors wide open. Inside, behind a false wall, they found restraints bolted to the floor, scratches gouged into the walls, pools of dried blood. And Ryan Whitaker, barely conscious, drugged, dehydrated, but alive. They also found wallets, IDs, and personal effects from at least 6 others. 3 of them confirmed missing. 3 names new to everyone. Blackbird, whose real name turned out to be Calvin Mercer, had vanished on foot. The manhunt lasted 3 days. Dogs, helicopters, endless fields of Nebraska prairie. They traced his footprints to a drainage culvert, then nothing. The theory was he'd stashed another vehicle nearby. For weeks afterward, every black truck on the interstate made us tense up. Every CB crackle made Marlene leave the cab. We switched to short local hauls around Colorado. Less money, but safer. A year later, the FBI finally caught Mercer at a truck stop in Montana, living under another alias, this time behind the wheel of a red Kenworth. A rookie driver recognized him from a wanted poster. When they arrested him, they found another hidden compartment, another victim, barely alive. Mercer pled out, avoiding the death penalty in exchange for life without parole. We had to testify. Seeing him in court, shackled, gray in the face, you'd swear he was just another worn-out old trucker. But when his eyes locked on ours, his lips moved soundlessly, the same way they had that night in Kearney, practicing words only he understood. 2 weeks after the sentencing, we sold our rig, took the payout and opened a small hardware store in Cheyenne. We've never looked back, because some roads you only need to drive once, and once is more than enough. My name is Tessa Monroe, but most of the lane calls me Tess. I'd been driving rigs for 3 years when I learned that the road still had a few surprises left for me. That June run in 2014, from Portland down to Phoenix, was supposed to be just another paycheck. Frozen seafood, a decent rate, and the kind of long highway miles that let you think your problems into smaller sizes. My old Mac had more than 800,000 miles on her, but she still purred when I asked her to. By the time the sun dipped low that Thursday, I'd already logged 7 hours and federal hours of service rules were whispering in the back of my head. Stop soon. My GPS showed a truck stop about 40 miles ahead, a place called Drywell Truck Plaza, right off Route 93. Never heard of it before, but the online notes promised cheap diesel and a clean shower. 2 things a sweaty driver coming out of the desert will trade a kidney for. I pulled off the highway around 4:30. The plaza squatted in the heat like a tired oasis. Wide lot that could have fit 50 rigs, but only 3 were parked. The building looked older than the highway. Faded paint, half the neon on the sign dead, a sag in the awning that made me wonder how it stayed up at all. Still, the pumps worked, and that's the crucial part. I eased in at pump 7, shut the engine off, and walked toward the automatic doors needing nothing more than water and a sandwich. Inside was the kind of place that makes fluorescent bulbs look evil. The lights buzzed and made everything lean slightly green. The smell was a 2-note olfactory slap. Old grease and cheap disinfectant that tried hard to pretend cleanliness would solve everything. Behind the counter stood a guy who looked like he'd aged wrong. He had bleached hair pulled into a comb-over that made his scalp look worse than it was, a tank top stained with oil and arms like a rail. His name, me tag Red Cal. He was maybe early 40s, all elbows and long, pale fingers that seemed to twitch when he wasn't touching something. His eyes latched onto me the second I walked in, not the casual glance you get from a bored clerk, but the kind of stare that catalogs. I grabbed a bottle of water, a wrapped turkey sandwich that looked survivable, and made my way to the counter. Cal smiled in a way that showed too many teeth. "Afternoon, ma'am," he said, voice higher than I expected, oddly sing-song. "Where you headed, if you don't mind me asking?" "South," I said, quick and vague. "Phoenix. Long run." I set the bill down. He held the 20 up to the light, turning it like a jeweler. That was the first red flag. Too much attention to the small things. "You stopping here tonight?" he asked, fingers drumming the counter. When I said I might, he brightened. "We got plenty of space. Quiet lot. Nobody bothers nobody here." When he handed my change back, he licked his thumb first and counted the coins, his fingertips brushing my palm in a way that lasted just a heartbeat too long. "I get off at midnight," he said, leaning forward like he wanted to share a secret. "Sometimes I walk the lot, make sure everyone's safe, especially the ladies traveling alone." The word ladies left a sour taste in my mouth. I told myself I was being paranoid. I'd been a bartender before I took to the road. I know how men look at women, how lonely people try to connect. Still, I parked at the far end of the lot once I finished fueling, away from the building, under a working lamp pole, windows shut and curtains drawn. From the back of the cab I could see Cal framed in the store window, watching the lot like a hawk. Maybe he was bored. Maybe he wasn't. I locked the doors, pulled the curtains, and settled into my bunk with the sandwich and a paperback. I slept light, the way you do when you get used to sleeping in strange places. Around 10:30 I dozed off. My tire iron lay by my seat, phone charging in the cup holder. The lot was quiet enough to be almost holy. At exactly 12:17, I woke. 3 slow knocks against my driver's side window, a pause, 3 more. My heart hit the back of my throat. I peered through the curtain. The parking light threw long shadows, and there he was. Cal, shirtless, pale in the artificial glow, holding a crowbar that gleamed where the lot light caught it. He knocked again, louder. "Hey there, lady driver," he called, sing-song and soft. "Saw your lights were off. You lonely out here? Thought maybe you'd like some company." My body did everything it could to obey the simplest command. Don't move. If he thought I was asleep, he might just go away. He paced then, the crowbar scraping along the truck's side with a skin-crawling sound. He circled the rig like a man circling a prize and then came back, pressing his face to my window until his breath fogged the glass. In the dim, I could make out his teeth. White, too straight for someone whose shirt had been a tank top for an hour. "Open up, sweetheart," he crooned. "Brought beers. We could have us a nice time." He pointed with the crowbar to an old Ford Ranger parked half a field away that definitely hadn't been there when I went in. I grabbed the phone to call 911, and my fingers fumbled like they were full of syrup. No signal. Nothing. Out in the middle of nowhere, your phone can be a pretty little paperweight. He must have seen the glow because he got mean, the sing-song twisting into taunt. "Who you calling?" he said. "Cops? Good luck. Nearest station's 45 minutes. My cousin's on dispatch. They won't hurry out for something small." Then came the hiss of air, the slow, sick sound of something going flat. "Oops," he said, cheery. "Looks like you got yourself a flat. 2 flats, actually. Maybe 3 by the time I'm done." He laughed in this thin, pleased way. I had a plan. I always have plans. I would slip out the passenger door on Titan, he opposite side, run for the next truck over, pound on its door until the driver came out. I opened the passenger door a crack and peeked. The other truck was gone. The lot was just Cal and me. "Finally up," he sang when he heard the door. I was getting tired of waiting. He moved to the passenger side. I could hear him trying the handle. When that failed, he went quiet, and that silence was worse than anything else. I hefted the tire iron until the metal bit my palms, something hard and honest in my hand. I eased into the driver's seat and started the engine. Even with flats, enough throttle and you can make a truck move. I thought I'd ram his Ford, make noise that would wake the highway. Before I could get traction, he climbed up onto my hood like a grotesque gargoyle, the crowbar raised high. I could see him crouched, silhouette against the lot light. "Don't make me break this nice windshield," he shouted, voice raw. "That's gonna cost you." He brought the crowbar down. The windshield spider-webbed but held. I saw the second blow aim, knew it would go through. I floored it, slammed the truck into reverse and backed hard. The world became metal and smoke and the terrible sound of my rims scraping pavement as I tore out of that parking place. Cal met the back of my rig, hit the asphalt like something you throw away. I didn't stop to look. I kept going until the highway entrance, sparks flying. 2 miles down the road, the lights of a chain truck stop gave me the goddamn security of other people. I pulled in with rims ruined and a scream in my ears. The security guard called the real cops. They found Cal back at his station running a story about me driving off without paying and attacking him. The security cameras told another story. The footage showed the crowbar, the flat tire scene, him pacing my truck and then climbing on the hood as I rolled out. When they searched his Ranger, they found ropes, zip ties, and a collection of women's CDL copies in a box. Several female drivers had filed reports over the past 2 years, all similar. Harassment escalating to attempts to force them from their rigs. Only a few had made it far enough away that they could call it off. I wasn't the first who'd run him off, but I was the first to give them footage. He was arrested that night. They charged him with assault and attempted kidnapping, and the investigation pulled a thread that reached further than just one creepy attendant. The sheriff told me in no uncertain terms that Cal, real name Caleb Finch, had been pushing up the same lines of behavior at small truck stops for a long time. He'd been careful, preying on women driving alone, on drivers who stopped late and trusted the light on the lot to mean safety. The ropes, the zip ties, they were chilling backups to plans that had, for a handful of women, almost ended in disaster. The county paid for the repairs on my rims as part of a victim restitution arrangement, but the hit to my credit was real. I still paid a chunk out of pocket, $3 grand for tires and rims, not counting the tow, the missed miles, the long bureaucratic headaches. More costly than money was the feeling it left behind. I stopped parking at small independent truck stops after that. When I had to pull into a 2-pump place on a lonely stretch, I sat in the cab with the engine running, windows up, doors locked, curtains closed like a cocoon. There were hearings, depositions. I testified. In court, Caleb wore a suit that tried to make him look straightened and respectable, but you could still see the hunger there in his eyes when he looked at the female jurors. They convicted him on several counts. He went away, but it didn't feel like the end. Small-town predators have ways of finding new prey when you stop watching. After that night, I altered my routines. I started calling ahead to the chain stops. I learned which lots had lighting and cameras and friendly staffs. I kept my tire iron in easy reach, and I started carrying a small can of bear spray in the cab as well as a compact flashlight that would wake a cow if you hit it hard enough. I also learned to trust that tiny prick in the back of my neck, the instinct my bartending days taught me, to get out of spaces where the peace felt wrong. People asked, "Why didn't you fight harder sooner?" The answer was simple: survival. You do what you can in the moment that gives the best chance to live. I could have done 100 things differently. Maybe I should have driven through the night. Maybe I should have parked under the light and paid for the shower. But hindsight turns simple choices into big regrets. Some things I still do. I tell new drivers the obvious stuff. Park near the pumps, not the restrooms. Don't sleep with both doors unlocked. Keep your phone charged. Don't open the door for anybody who makes you feel wrong. They roll their eyes sometimes, but when they hear my story, they stop smiling. A few have come back later and thanked me, told me they changed their habits because of what I said. That, more than anything, makes walking back into the cab worth it. Caleb Finch was convicted, but the small print world of highway predators didn't end with him. There are other weirdos out there with their own little tricks. I saw the plates he'd used on his Ranger later in court. Plates that had been swapped. Plates that didn't trace cleanly. I saw the file the sheriff kept on him and how neat and terrible it looked, folded into dates and times, names and places. It made me realize how vulnerable a sleeping driver is. You sleep, your head goes heavy, and for a few hours you are trusting someone else not to pry open the thin safe TTTs. That is your cab? I still drive. I love the road too much to give it up. The hum of the tires at 60 miles an hour is my kind of music. But my choices are sharper now. I take my showers at chains with cameras. I park where the light reaches the cab. I make noise if I feel watched. I keep my tire iron not hidden but ready, like a sacrament. And when I stop at a little one-pump place with a man behind the counter who smiles too long, I don't tell him where I'm headed. I check the lot from the cab, then I drive on if it feels wrong. You learn what's important in a hurry out there. The truck, a working heart, and that stubborn, ridiculous instinct to stay alive. I still have nightmares sometimes, flat tires and crowbars and the hiss of a nighttime lot. But I sleep better than I did after that night. Mostly because I know I fought my way out. If you drive the highways and you're a woman, or you just happen to be alone, listen to the little voice that says, no. Don't be polite when it matters most. The road is a good place, but it has edges. Learn them, walk them, live another day.